Hello, everybody. Greetings, salutations, and hello. Hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to Adventures in History. It's a fine Tuesday here in the sweltering heat of what was supposed to be the fall season. I don't know if it's fall wherever you are, but it's still very much summer here in the deep south. It was 85 today with a heat index of 100 degrees, and it felt like walking through soup outside. Hey, KP, good to see you, man. So I hope that you, wherever you are, autumnal. I hope that you are enjoying your Tuesday. It's actually been a really good day. It's been a very productive day. I actually had the urge to go hang outside and maybe even take the puppy for a walk, and that was just destroyed by the heat. It just would not have worked. But we have the hope that soon it will get cooler. According to the forecast, it's supposed to be in the 70s by the weekend, but we shall see. We shall see. But this is Adventures in History, where we do history in a fun way, and we talk about things that are historical in nature, but we don't necessarily take ourselves seriously. The history is serious, but we are very much not. And we bring in some pop culture and some pretty horrible jokes, all sorts of really bad puns and fun stuff like that. I actually heard a really great dad juke. I guess dad juke is what happens when he's backing away from the grill and the dog runs by and he has to maneuver very rapidly to keep all of the hamburgers on the plate and not scuff up his New Balance shoes. That's the dad juke. I guess a dad joke, rather. This is viewer request number 42. Hey, a Cave Geek. Good to see you. Hey, Metrand. About to go to bed. All right. Well, I hope that my dulcet tones lull you into a wonderful, restful sleep. And today is the 42nd anniversary of Hitchhiker's Guide. I did not know that, but that is an absolutely amazing coincidence. That is great. That's really great. I did not plan that. Hey, Atuna, good to see you, man. What an auspicious day. I don't know. Did somebody kill a goat this morning? If you killed a goat and you read the auspices, then we can call it auspicious. Otherwise, we're just hijacking a Latin word to mean foreboding or something. I don't know. Bum ba-dum bum, bum ba-dum bum bum. No camber. I apologize if I am not properly pronouncing your name, your username there, but welcome to the adventure and thanks for the follow. I hope you're having a good one. Yeah. So what was I saying? I was saying something about 42 and the answer to life, the universe, and everything. It'll come back to me, or maybe it won't. But yeah, we're talking history today. We do viewer request streams usually every other Tuesday. I took last Tuesday off because I didn't want to have a double stream week on my birthday week. So, oh yeah, it was a good day. It was a glorious day. It was rather a nice day for a white wedding. It was a good day. I got to write a little bit this morning, which was something that I honestly have not done since, oh, good gracious, a really long time. Last year was pretty rough on me, mentally speaking. I did not have a lot of creative juices flowing last year. Also, I was working on another master's degree, which I finished up in August. So it has been a little while since I felt the ability to write and the time to write align, and it was really pleasant. I sort of edited and added to a short story that I was previously working on, and it's more or less in a first draft form for an editor. So I felt fairly positive about that. So, are you talking about the Ride of the Rohirrim? Pretty sure auspicious has to do with birds. Yeah, you can watch the flight patterns of birds. That'll work, or the eating patterns of the sacred chickens. But usually a Haruspex is going to have a fairly wide ability. Haruspex, by the way, was the Roman religious official whose job it was to determine omens. And that's where we actually get the word auspicious from, because a Haruspex is one who reads the auspices. And these are things like, are the birds flying in the right direction? Are the chickens eating in the right way? Or after I have killed this goat and looked at its insides, are the internals, the organs looking some particular way? Do those give us a hint about, how the day is going to be, or how the gods are going to view our particular endeavor? So yeah, Haruspex. They were pretty big in the Roman Republic. They fell out of use a little bit in the later Republic because they became very politicized. People began to basically hijack the position to shut down votes of their opponents if their opponents were trying to pass some sort of legislation that they did not care for. But they were brought back by the Emperor Claudius, who was a particularly religious fellow. This would have been in the 40s AD when he brought those. I believe it was 46, but I'm not 100% certain on that specific date, so don't quote me on that. Yeah, there's a random fact for you out of the blast in the past, out of nowhere. So yeah, again, this is a viewer request night, and we are talking about the Nazis, specifically what happened to all the Nazis after World War II. And it is fair to say that a great number of them were captured and put on trial, but thousands of them managed to get out of Germany. And tonight we will be taking a look at exactly how they got out and where they went to. And in certain situations, how they were managed to be brought back to justice. So it's an interesting topic. This is one that has been sort of kicked around a little while. It showed up at one point in a viewer request poll where people were, sort of bringing up topics, and it got voted on and it got some votes, but didn't actually get completely picked up. And then last time we had a viewer request, Kilted Preacher here in the chat decided that he would spend the points. Where have all the Nazis gone? Long time. Yeah, exactly. KP decided to spend the points to request it directly. So here we are. So yeah, this is a fairly interesting topic, and one that I think a lot of people sort of know happened, maybe anecdotally, like, oh yeah, didn't those Nazis get out and end up in South America somewhere? That's where a lot of them did end up, but I don't know if a lot of people know necessarily how they got out and all of the stuff that was involved in specifically getting them out and getting them hidden and how all that sort of played out. So this is going to be an interesting one, and I think this is part of history that doesn't get talked about a lot, which always makes me excited. I always sort of enjoy talking about the things that I don't think a lot of people talk about. And it's Nazis. People are very interested in talking about Nazi history. It's one of those things that sort of fascinates people. And I know this from teaching history for a long time now. Yeah, they took the Eagles, right? Why couldn't the Eagles just come take the Nazis to Argentina? Duh. Nazis, I thought that is the most popular history subject to mention without any knowledge of. Yes, absolutely, Shiggy. That is also, hey, Shiggy. And hey, Moose, good to see you. Yeah, a lot of people like to talk about World War II. It's sort of the last big thing that a lot of people know anything about. So yeah. Oh, and this little thing here just popped up in chat. You can see that I've added a bit of a reminder because we've been getting some newer people in the chat lately, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that it is absolutely okay to ask questions. Please do. The more, the merrier. The more that people are involved, the better I usually think that the stream goes. And I don't know why it puts that random $ there. That is not subliminal messaging. That is just Streamlabs randomly throwing a $ into the particular repeated message. So I don't know why it does that. That's not some sort of like give me money thing. I know that it looks suspicious, but it is not. Shiggy. Thanks, Shiggy. Are we including Nazis that went to Russian Americans? Tuna, yes, we will talk about that. Specifically the American side. It's a little bit harder to talk about the Russian side because a lot of those people disappeared. Also, I don't want to necessarily spend 4 hours talking about something. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these people got out, where some of the big leaders went, and then we'll talk about what was the largest number of people that were Nazis that got out, which was basically this big thing called Operation Paperclip, which hopefully will not be as annoying as Clippy. So let us begin. And to talk about how these people got out, we need to introduce a term. And that is rat line. A rat line is the name for a secret connection of pathways that people used after World War II to sneak Nazis out of Europe. And there actually were quite a few rather well-established pathways, and they were overseen by certain people. There were particular stops along the way. I don't want to make a direct parallel here between these two things, but it's sort of like an underground railroad sort of thing where people had houses and buildings, but instead of allowing slaves to get to the freedom in the northern part of the United States, this is Nazis being able to get to freedom in other countries, which is why, again, I'm not trying to make a direct parallel. I'm just using this as an example to sort of bring something to mind that people might understand a little bit more. Finally, we get to know where Hitler went. Hitler went down into his bunker where he met his own weapon and then got pulled up and burned in a ditch by the Russians. Hey, I saw you were trying to escape persecution for your crimes against humanity. Would you like some help? Very much yes. Yes, Shiggy, I'm aware of the weirdness of that reference. It's just the closest thing that I could bring into people's common memory, right? We have to use the tools that are available to us, and I prefaced it and followed it up with a disclaimer, so I feel like I was okay in that situation. Anyway, so what's up with these rat lines? Well, it might be a bit surprising that a lot of these rat lines that were developed to get people, especially fascists, out of Europe were initially set up by members of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church was actually quite active in this, and there were members of the Catholic Church that were very, very active in this particular effort. Hey, I see you have loads of gold and art. You want some help escaping? Bringing their stuff with them was actually not what a lot of Nazis did. Most of the Nazis that were able to sneak out actually managed to bring very, very little wealth with them. A lot of that stuff ended up being sort of hoarded in these big caches that were hopefully, well, the Nazi leadership hoped that those would remain hidden, but the Allies found quite a few of those. And the ones that were full of art and money on the Allied side of things managed to get somewhat returned, at least a little bit. The ones that were found by the Russians sort of evaporated, just to be honest. So, again, the Catholic Church is going to be in a lot of cahoots with these particular people, and there are going to be sort of two main locations that are going to be kind of the European ends of the rat lines. And one of those is in Spain, and the other one is actually in Italy, and to a certain extent in the Vatican itself. So we need to take a moment here to talk about this guy. This guy is Pope Pius XII, who was the Pope during this particular period of time. Now, we have to ask ourselves, how much did Pope Pius really understand? And, of course, there are people within the Catholic Church that would say, oh, no. Pope Pius had no knowledge of this. He did not condone any of these things. He was not actively participating in this stuff. He was not aware that these particular people were who they said they were. He was only operating under the idea that these were sort of war refugees that had lost their papers, that sort of thing. And it's fair here to ask some questions. First off, I don't know if we will ever really know how much Pius XII knew, but it's fair to say that he had given some very vague instructions here. So the specific portion that the Vatican played was mostly with getting people traveling papers. So there had been a lot of refugees coming out of the war, even during the war, and even before the war. It's fair to say that at this point, Pius XII was not the Pope. Prior to the war, a guy named Pius XI was. Okay, good gracious. Was he pious because he was... when a person becomes Pope, they pick their papal name. They get to pick it themselves. Nobody gets to pick it for them. Uncle Bill?
Romans.
Countrymen, lend me your ears. Hey, Uncle Bill, how's it going? Thanks for the host. So basically what happens is that when the cardinal that is elected Pope becomes Pope, they sort of look back at all of the other popes and decide to pick a name that is sort of like, I want to be Pope in the theme of this person.
Romans.
More countrymen.
Lend me your ear. Come to bury Caesar, not to praise.
Was he the same Pope that put a crown on Hitler's head? I don't think so, but maybe. I think that was Pius XI, I believe. But you might want to check me on that too. Now, I don't know for 100%. No, my Pope name is Jesus. Hopefully no conflicts. Yeah, they usually don't pick Jesus. There has not been a Pope Jesus. Which is sort of interesting that right now we have Pope Francis, who is actually Francis I. Nobody else had chosen that name. And this caused a minor bit of a stir within the sort of upper echelons of the Catholic Church, because this sort of lends itself to, like, well, which Francis is he talking about? Is he talking about Francis of Assisi, or is he talking about one of the other Saint Francises, or is he trying to be his own person? It basically, it's supposed to be sort of a designator of how you're going to be Pope. So here's the thing. Pope Pius XII, what did he actually know? Well, the Vatican had been involved in a lot of humanitarian work, especially with refugees and especially with people that had been either forcibly kicked out of a location or had escaped without their actual identification papers. And there was a branch of the Red Cross that had set up operation inside of Italy after the Allies took a substantial portion of Italy, and the Vatican was working fairly closely with the Red Cross there. And what the Vatican was doing, because the Vatican is a country itself, it was basically allowing a lot of these people to sort of get official identification through the Vatican. So if you were one of these refugees or one of these people that had lost, your ability to identify yourself on paper, you could get to the Vatican, or you could get to one of these Red Cross stations, and you could get in touch with somebody that represented the Vatican. and then they would basically help you to create an identity for yourself. Well, this is clearly going to be something that is going to be abusable, and Pius XII was really pushing for people to get papers. He was really pushing for these people to have identification, and even after it became fairly clear that a lot of these people were not who they said they were, Pius XII basically kept his mouth shut. And the CIA has had done and was doing quite a bit of sort of watching a lot of this stuff and investigating a lot of these things. And there's a particular quote that went down in a file from the CIA that basically said that Pius would rather have a Nazi on a boat to South America than in a jail in Europe. And this partially has to do with the fact that, and this is not disputed, this is pretty well understood, Pius was really afraid of communism, and especially was afraid of the spread of communism, and particularly afraid of Joseph Stalin, and did not want communism to spread throughout Europe. And he was worried that if some of these fascists got stuck in prison, that they might be sort of radicalized towards communism. Now, we know that fascism and communism are not the same thing, but if you hate the people that put you in jail, you might go do crazy stuff. So what he was worried about was maybe these high-level Nazi operatives. Fascism and communism are absolutely different. Ideologically, they are absolutely different. In practice, the way that people do communism is not necessarily different, but by definition and by philosophical approach, they are different. In communism, there is no state. The state is the people, and the people hold everything in common. In fascism, the state is the most important thing, and individuals do not matter. And that's a pretty wide difference. Now, in practice, they look a lot more similar, but they're philosophically different. So, the point here is that if Pius knew that this was happening, which he may have, which he might have sort of implicitly implied to do, he didn't stop it. There were some pretty big people in the Catholic Church that were working with these people to get them out of Europe. And it's really hard for me as an individual to believe that Pius did not know that this stuff was happening. Unfortunately, the history of the Vatican is very secret, and their internal documents are all kept under lock and key. And if they wanted to, the Vatican could basically unseal all of the documents and internal communiques and all of these things that they have from this period of time and let historians or archivists go through and look at stuff, but they will not do so. This is something that is not particularly done very frequently. So, will we ever know exactly how much Pius XII knew about this? Probably not. Probably not. But I would say it's pretty fishy. You never have thought. Looks like Pope Pius XII is the one. Okay. Thank you for looking that up. Ich komme Australia. Yeah, that's never going to happen. But why would the Catholic Church want people to know the truth? Oh, Kelly. Hey, Kelly, good to see you. Wait, the Catholic Church was involved in nefarious deeds? Color me choked. Or is that supposed to be shocked? Perhaps shocked? Color me shocked? Anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so if it wasn't Pius XII, and we can maybe give him a pass, who was it? Well, it's time to talk about this guy. Alice Hoodall, who is this guy. So this guy is a bishop. He was an Austrian, and he worked inside of the Vatican and was basically the guy in the Vatican that was responsible for sort of teaching other German-speaking bishops and church leaders how to do things. So he's sort of like the teacher of the teachers. But again, he's working inside the Vatican. This means that he has a lot of very high-level contacts. And he is going to be one of the most central members of these rat line organizers. He is going to be responsible for getting some of the biggest Nazis out of Germany. And he is going to be very much in the center of a lot of these wheelings and dealings. But he's not necessarily alone in this. There are a lot of other people that sort of end up getting stuck. Not necessarily stuck, that's not the right way to say it. There are a lot of other people that end up in these particular situations where they are getting people out. There are a lot of monastery leaders, especially in places that are like in northern Italy and over here in the Balkans, especially Croatia. A lot of these monasteries around the Adriatic here are going to be used as holdover spots where people basically, you get moved out of Germany and you get to Italy, and then they put you in one of these monasteries, Illuminati. I'll take it. Close enough. We can call it that. So a lot of these monasteries were places that people stopped over at, including one particular monastery in Croatia that was a really big holdover that's run by this guy. And I would type his name out, but it's particularly long and it has a lot of the little symbols. This guy's name is Krunoslav Dragonovic. And Dragonovic was a Bosnian priest in Serbia, and his monastery was sort of like one of the big ones where you got sort of pocketed away until they could line up your papers and figure out how to get you out of Europe. So we do see here a lot of participation within both the Catholic clergy and some of the Catholic level membership. It's fair to say here that monastic leaders, people that are heads of the monasteries, these abbots, are not actual church leadership. They are not ordained, but they do very frequently have a lot of power. They are sometimes politically chosen by the leadership of the Catholic Church or through bribes or things like that. So Dragonovic is going to be one of the guys that's sort of central to a lot of these plans as well. And it helped to have people in different parts of Europe. So there were people over in Spain, again, there are people in Italy, people in the Balkans. And this allows for a variety of options, especially when the Nazi hunting really starts heating up. It's easier for a lot of these people that are running rat lines to have various locations to stash these people. All right. So who are we actually talking about? Who are the people that are getting smuggled out? Well, I sort of have this split up into two groups, and I have labeled them in my notes, the brass and the brains. So that's kind of a joke, but anyway. Let's talk about some of the actual big Nazi leaders. Now, before we get involved in this, it is fair to note that we're going to talk about 6 or 7 of these big leaders that were sort of high up in the Nazi party, and then we'll talk about several big scientists that were in the Nazi science program. There were thousands of Nazis of various levels of importance that managed to sneak out through these rat lines. People that were low-level unit commanders all the way up to people that were in the actual leadership circles of the Nazi party. So please don't think that just because we're only talking about maybe 10 to 12 people tonight, that these are the only people. There were literally thousands of individuals that got out. And it's not even just German fascists. There were people that were supporters in fascist supporters in Poland, in Austria, and Czechoslovakia, throughout the Balkans. Anybody that had sort of gone over to the Nazi side when the Germans took over their territory were more or less available. These red lines were available to them. These Nazi sympathizers were very open with getting everybody that they could out. It's also fair to point out that this was not some sort of attempt at creating kind of a Nazi government in exile. There was never really any attempt to get all these people to one location so that they could sort of plot the retaking of Germany. It was really just, I need somebody to save my hide, and I need somewhere to go. So this was not some sort of like deep level covert treason-based thing. All right, so let's talk about Gerhard Bonn. Gerhard Bonn is this guy. It's my safe house and I need it now. I don't know if you all are familiar with really bad... I don't even know if that's nationwide. But there's a particular commercial that plays all the time on television here in the South, where you call them, and if you are receiving money from a structured settlement or annuity, you call them and they get you... Is JG... Oh, no, I see what you're doing. You're changing it. Yeah, so the actual thing is JG Wentworth, and it's 877 cash now, and that's the thing that you call, but KP has turned this to Germans. Was there a line where you were too worthless to be on a rat line, but too important to be ignored during the takeover? Yeah, there actually was. And it wasn't a particular, like, dedicated one for the lackeys. But they would try to get anybody out, right? They would just basically try to get anybody out. But if you were like a big person that had a lot of connections and were really, really high up, you got the attention of more powerful people on the rat lines. This commercial plays during The Price is Right. All right, so anyway, Gerhard Bonn is this guy. Now, if you know anything about Nazi high command and recognize them by sight, you might know who this guy is, but we'll talk about him in just a bit. I'll go ahead and spoil it. This is a guy named Joseph Mengele. But Gerhard Bonn here is this guy. You can see him wearing his very clear SS uniform. And this guy is a pretty big dude. He was originally in charge of a lot of the mass killing projects. So inside the Nazi structure, the camps fell under the SS, and there were a lot of people in the SS that had sort of been tasked to figure out what to do and how to hide, what to do with these people, how to hide the bodies of these people, and then how to kill them in really big numbers. And Bonn was a guy that was involved in a lot of the early planning and operating of how to work out the logistics of how to do these mass murders. And it is estimated that he participated in the deaths of tens of thousands of people. Mass killing, you goob. Sean. Yeah. So anyway, so this guy is a pretty bad guy. It has the death of thousands of people on his hands, tens of thousands of people on his hands. And he was going to actually sneak out a little bit kind of ahead of the war and manages to get over to Argentina. Now, Argentina is going to be the location of a lot of these, a lot of these particular Nazis. And part of that is because of, let me share it on my borders. Argentina, a lot of that is because of the leadership. The leader at the time was a guy named Juan Perón, and Perón was sort of fine with fascists and understood the benefit of working with powerful European forces, especially the Catholic Church, and had basically made an agreement to take as many of these people as possible. And this is where Bon was going to get stationed. And he actually stayed there in Argentina for a few years and ended up sneaking back into West Germany under a fake name. And when Bon was captured, he got put on trial. And in the process of the trial, he got sort of... the trial got stuck, and he got put back in jail for the trial proceedings to continue, and all of these. It gets kind of complicated. But he escaped out of jail, and he got back into Argentina from the same connections that got him to Argentina the first time. And at that point, the West Germans tried to get Argentina to give him back up, which they eventually did. So he got dragged back over to Germany and got put back on trial. But the trials at that point were sort of, again, dragging. There's a lot of paperwork involved in this stuff. And by that point, Bowen was already quite advanced in age. This is in the late 50s and early 60s. And eventually his trial was dismissed. The charges against him were basically allowed to kind of expire, which doesn't really make sense if we're talking about the murder of tens of thousands of people. But basically he got let off because he was in really bad health and he was old. So Bone, one of the top SS brass leaders, basically ended up getting off without any sort of punishment. Now, he did spend a little bit of time in jail, but he was effectively released for the end of his life. So that's a bit of a bummer. But not all of these stories are particularly heartwarming. Let's all remember that Nazis killed, millions and millions of people, right? Okay, so moving on, let's talk about what's probably the most well-known of these Nazi flight people, and a guy that we've talked about previously on stream a couple of times, a guy named Adolf Eichmann, who is this guy, who, I don't know, so I know that people have probably heard this phrase before, but I think he has a very punchable face. I think that this guy looks rather smug, and, well, let's just say that he got what was coming to him. Okay, so this is Adolf Eichmann, and this is one of the bigger Nazis. He was the head of the SS. So for those, I'm sorry, I realize that I haven't actually defined my terms here. So the SS in the Nazi sort of hierarchy was the group called the Schutzstaffel, which is basically special staff. And these were the people that were the highest level operators in the German world. These were the ones that were closest to Hitler himself. He looks like a young version of Tarkin. I can see that. Hey, JMR, how are you? So the SS are the basically the really, really top people. And specifically during his tenure as the head of the SS, this guy was over the death camps. He was the guy that was in charge of running and operating all of the death camps. I'm doing pretty well. We're talking about some pretty heavy material, but I had a pretty good day. You're thinking SS stood for superstar. No, not so much. Not so much. There was a kid at your school with the nickname Little Eichmann, something only the teachers called him and you never knew him. Oh, wow. Wow. That's not a good nickname to have. No. That's fine, JMR. You're fine. Happy lurking. You are welcome to just sit and listen. That's fine. Little Eichmann. I don't know if I would be cool with that. Anyway, so what happened to him? Well, when the war ended, Eichmann was going to go into hiding, and he knew that he was a target, right? He knew that he was a high priority get. So he's also just a get, but that's a British slang term, and I don't know how many people know that. Anyway, so he went into basically undercover living, and he was staying in some of these very, very rural parts of northern Germany. At least they didn't make it more obvious by putting an R in front of it, right? So, because then it would have gone to everybody, right? So he was under a false name working in some rural areas in northern Germany, and this is what got him hooked into the rat lines to begin with, because he got into some contact with some German Catholics, and they are going to put him in contact with Hudal, who is, of course, again, the guy that's sort of running the big rat lines. They get him to Italy. They get him some fake papers through the Red Cross there, and then they sneak him over to Argentina. And Eichmann was going to live more or less a very simple life in Argentina all the way up until 1960. And it's at that point that he was going to get located by a gentleman that is going to basically go on to become effectively the greatest Nazi hunter there was. A guy named Simon Wiesenthal, who is this guy. Wiesenthal was an Israeli citizen, a doctor there, but had contacts within the government and ends up becoming sort of a professional Nazi hunter. A person who was methodical, who checked through... yes, he is the one that the movie is based on, hunting Nazis. So Wiesenthal is... I guess is Wiesenthal, not Wiesenthal, sorry. Wiesenthal. He looks like the same guy. No. Those are pretty different dudes. So Eichmann, Wiesenthal. Right. What do you do, sir? I hunt Nazis. Yeah, that was what he did. And he had a group of people that were sort of working with him, and Wiesenthal was working more or less in conjunction with the Israeli special service, intelligence service called the Mossad. He looks like the same guy. Maybe we're thinking of different movies. I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about, Shiggy. I have lost an antecedent somewhere in there. So they find out through through Eichmann being a bit of a pompous jerk. Some West German ex-Nazis had gone to Argentina because they found out that Eichmann was over there, and Eichmann had done all of these interviews with these people, basically under the cloak of secrecy. But some of that material got out, and they found out, Wiesenthal found out that Eichmann had at one point been in Buenos Aires, and then they're going to go down into Argentina, and they're going to track him down and find him. Now, this is a rather controversial point in international diplomacy, because the Mossad people that basically get Eichmann out of Argentina do not do so with the Argentine government's knowledge. They find him, they drugged him and dressed him up as somebody that could basically get through customs and such, and they only sort of let it be known that he was arrested when they already had him in Israel. And at that point, the Perón leadership government down in Argentina started making a bit of a noise about this. Like you can't necessarily just do this stuff. Weekend with Bernie, but like weekend with Adolf. And the Israelis basically said, this guy is a massive war criminal. He has the death of millions of people on his hands, and you're not really going to do anything about it. So the Argentine government sort of like post facto gave them the okay, not that the Israelis were ever going to let him go back to Argentina. Back when you could drag sleeping people on planes. The good old days. Right? So Eichmann got put on trial and hanged. And this was all very public. And this was in 1960 and 61 and 62. This was one of the big moments that brought a lot of people's awareness to exactly how bad the Holocaust was. The Eichmann trial was televised and broadcast on news stations around the world. And what made it specifically impactful was that a lot of the people that testified in the trial against Eichmann were actually people that were at the camps that he was running. And they gave firsthand accounts on the record of exactly how horrible it was there. And because, again, this was televised internationally, this brought a lot of people's awareness to the fact that, yes, it was actually a really, really bad thing. Because we have to remember that today when something happens, we immediately get bombarded with videos, we get bombarded with images. 14 different news outlets are covering the same thing. Everybody's sort of fighting for our attention. But in World War II, a lot of the stuff that happened in and around the camps during the liberation was not really made very public. And a lot of people heard these things, you have your big headlines like 12 million dead, but that's not as impactful as someone that actually lived through it getting on television where you can watch them recount these particular events. And this was a pretty big deal. Yeah, you heard it on the radio, maybe. Right, so the media back in the World War II period was not as ever present as it is today. So the Eichmann trial was a big deal, a really big deal. All right, so I mentioned this particular guy earlier. Joseph Mengele. So here's Mengele with his crap-eating grin. Another guy that looks very punchable. He's a pretty horrible dude. So Mengele was a scientist. And he was in the SS, and he basically had sort of a carte blanche to do whatever sort of experiments that he wanted to. And having a captive population of people within the concentration camps, he decided to do human experiments and decided to do a whole bunch of really, really horrible stuff. Like, let's just start injecting people with random chemicals just to see what happens. We'll just shoot them up with whatever we've got sitting around just to see what happens. He was particularly fascinated with twins and would do stuff like cut one of the twins' arms off to see if the other one felt it. Or torture one twin to see if the other one would feel it. But he didn't count them as humans, and that's a fair point. A lot of these high-ranking Nazis looked at Jewish people as not even human beings. But Mengele was a real, actual monster. This guy had no conscience and no empathy. The truest kind of definition of sociopath here. Pretty horrible guy. Is that where Idi Amin got the idea? Quite possibly. I'm not sure how much Idi Amin had read about the Nazi leadership. Idi Amin is another guy that is a pretty horrible human. and unfortunately did not get what was really coming to him either. Anyway, so what's up with Mingala? So Mingala actually got captured, and he was in a prisoner of war camp that was being run by the United States. And while there, he was able to basically craft a backstory that sort of covered up his own identity. And he managed to get out and basically not necessarily even escape, but potentially even be let out of the prisoner of war camp. Now, of course, the United States says, oh no, he escaped. We're not really sure. He could have maybe just walked out the front gate. And one of the reasons why he was mistaken was that he was a member of the SS, and most of the SS had a specific tattoo that sort of designated them as a ranking member of the SS. But Mingala did not have that particular tattoo. So he was able to basically say, like, look, I'm not who you say that I am. I don't have the tattoo. Everybody in the leadership has this, but he didn't. So he was able to get out and got connected into the rat lines, and first ended up down in Argentina. And when he got to Argentina, he sort of heard that there were people looking for him. And this is especially true because his name came up all the time in the Nuremberg trials. So not all of the Nazi brass escaped. A lot of them were actually captured and put on trial. And a lot of the people in the Nuremberg trials basically tried to throw other Nazis under the bus to gain leniency from the courts. And everybody was throwing Mingala under the bus because they said, oh, you want to know who the monster is? This guy's the monster, right? This guy's the horrible guy. You should go find Mingala. So he knew that he was really sort of a high priority target. A guy behind Mingala in line cuts off some of the flesh on his neck. I'm also not with who you say him. I don't have the tattoo. I was just following orders, which of course is the sort of kind of famous Nuremberg defense of a lot of the middle level Nazi leadership. I was just doing what I was told, which is a horrible excuse, by the way. If it's wrong, you shouldn't do it. So Wiesenthal had a lot of information on Mingala, and Mingala decided that Argentina was not good enough. So he ended up sort of sneaking over into Paraguay, which is another country down in South America. And he stayed in Paraguay for a while, and then he made his way over to Brazil, which is a different situation and a different story altogether. So if we're looking at borders again, where are my borders? Borders, thank you. So here into Argentina, right? And then we're going to move up here to Paraguay, and then we're going to move over here into Brazil. And when Mingala got to Brazil, he basically felt secure enough at that point to begin living under his own name. And there were multiple attempts at various levels of government to try to get Mingala extradited, because when eventually the Nazi hunters found him, but the Brazilian government was pretty adamant that they had no ability to extradite him because the crimes were not committed in their country, and they didn't recognize a lot of the stuff, and blah blah blah. Basically, Mingala lived for the rest of his life in luxury in Brazil. And he actually died in 1979 while swimming. He was having a nice day and went swimming, and he had some heart complications and either a heart attack or a stroke, and died while swimming at a ripe old age. So, oh, justice. Sometimes you don't come through, right? But there are others. Eric Priebke. This is probably a guy that you might not have ever heard of. Probably died of Mossad complications. That is speculated, but by the point that 1979 rolled around, the guy was in pretty bad shape. And he had already had a couple of strokes prior to that were well documented and not necessarily suspicious. So it could have been Mossad complications, but it's just as likely that he died of natural causes. All right, so here we go. Eric Priebke. Now, this guy is interesting, not necessarily because of how important he was, but because of the story. And I chose this guy mostly because the story is interesting. He was only a mid-level commander. He was in the Gestapo for a while, and then sort of graduated up to being a mid-level SS commander. He had been sought after for some war crimes. He was responsible for the deaths of several hundred innocent civilians in Italy as a response against some Italian... I guess I should start at the beginning. Towards the end of the war, when it was pretty clear that Italy was potentially going to fall to the Allied invasion of Italy, the Germans moved down and basically occupied Italy. And during that period of time, there were people within the Italian government that were basically trying to resist the Germans. And a particular group of Italian resistance fighters killed a few of the German officers. And as a response, Priebke came in and killed about 350 civilians to basically reinforce the idea that Germany was in charge. So this guy is a murderer. He did a lot of the murders himself. Actually shot lots of these people himself. So he's not a nice guy. Let's be clear about that. But he's not on the same level as like Mengele or an Eichmann when it comes to body count. Evil is evil, right? But this guy's just sort of like more evil than anybody you'll ever meet, hopefully. Not like a true monster. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to color shades of black here. The guy's a bad dude. Anyway, he was going to manage to get out of Italy with Alois Hudal's support. Again, this is the bishop that's in the church that's running the big rat lines. With these guys, we're having a who's the bigger butthole contest. Exactly, Cave. Like they're all horrible people, and it's hard to delineate shades of horrible here, right? So he's going to make his way to get to Argentina, and Priebke is going to live there for 50 years, basically scot-free. But what is interesting, and why I chose to talk about him specifically, is that he was actually brought to justice by the American Broadcast Company. Yeah, ABC News. There were some people in ABC News that were doing stories on sort of like the last Nazis, right? Because in the early 2000s, a lot of these Nazis were, or the early 90s, and basically by the 80s and 90s, a lot of the Nazis were dying, and most of them were dying in jail, but a lot of these people were dying. So this ABC Investigatorial News Department sort of started looking for basically any other Nazis that got loose. And they found Priebke. And they actually went down to Argentina and basically caught him coming out of a building, getting into his car, and started asking him questions like, why did you kill all those people in Italy? And why were you part of the Nazi party? And he's just sort of completely dumbstruck by all this. But the German government finds out that he's down there. They send orders for extradition. And at this point, the Perón dynasty was well gone from Argentina. And Argentina gave up Priebke. So he actually got sent back to Germany, got put on trial, got found guilty, and spent the rest of his life in jail. But I just always thought it was really interesting that ABC News was the one that found this guy. That's kind of a weird thing. I heard Nazi Germany, your yearly pay was based on the number of people you killed. I don't know if that's necessarily true, Shiggy. I know that at certain points there were sort of targeted hit lists that had kind of a bounty attached. If you could produce certain people that were in the resistance of this particular area, or was a politician in this area that was in hiding. So maybe that's where that particular rumor gets a start. But I don't know if there was a specific cash for murder exchange. All right. Walter Ralph. Walter Ralph is this guy. Here, decked out in his good old-fashioned SS hat. You can see the little death's head. Are we the baddies? Yes, you are the baddies. This guy's a pretty bad dude. He was an SS officer, so he's in the high-ranking leadership levels of the SS. And he was one of the early inventors of mass murdering techniques, specifically the use of carbon monoxide. There's a place called Kelmno, which was one of the prisoner of war camps and concentration camps. And Ralph was the guy that basically figured out that you could cram all these people in the back of a van that was sort of sealed and run the exhaust pipe back into the back of the van and then drive a certain distance away from the camp to where you had a mass grave dug. And by the time you drove from the camp to the particular mass grave, everybody in the back of the van would be dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. This is something that is going to be used as a sort of test case for later uses of gases like Zyklon B to kill people at big camps like Auschwitz and Birkenau. So this guy was sort of the progenitor of mass execution via poisonous gases. And he is going to eventually get down into Italy and links up with, once again, our guy Alois Hudal, who is going to actually sneak him into Syria. And this was an interesting move here. Ralph is going to get over here. So our borders, this is Syria. And actually becomes a fairly high-level advisor to the Syrian government, which is kind of crazy because, I mean, if you look, like right next to Syria, you have Israel. And what is Israel doing at this point? Hunting Nazis, right? So I guess this guy would have the answer to the age-old question, how many clowns can you fit into a Volkswagen Bug? Yeah, probably. Maybe not a Bug, but a Volkswagen van. But I feel even kind of weird about making that point. Anyway, so he becomes an advisor to Syria's government, and he's using a sort of a pseudonym here, but he starts hearing that the Nazi hunters are after him, specifically Wiesenthal. And Wiesenthal's on his trail, so he's like, okay, crap, I've got to get out of Syria. So he gets Hudal to move him to Argentina. So he's now going to go all the way over here, over to Argentina. And he spends a few years there, but because of the work of people like Wiesenthal tracking these Nazis down into Argentina, Ralph is not comfortable, and he actually manages to sneak across the border into Chile, which is the long, thin country here that borders the Pacific. When he is found, Wiesenthal's on his trail, and Wiesenthal finds out that he's in Chile, and they start trying to do the extradition thing. Was it the weather? Why did everybody go to Argentina? So, Shiggy, mostly it's because of the Catholic Church connections. So the Catholic Church is very big in Argentina, and the government of Argentina at that time under Juan Perón was very amenable to doing favors for the Catholic Church. and they did not really have a problem with fascists. They did not see what was going on in Germany as necessarily the worst thing ever. And Argentina at the time was trying to become a larger global partner, and they were trying to set up a lot of trade networks, and Germany had been sort of one of the countries that was interested in doing business with them. And so there were already some business contacts between Argentina and Germany. Most notably, there were some German factories. There were some factories that were owned by German companies down in Argentina already. So there's already an economic connection. So when you put the church connection on top of it, and the fact that there's already a sizable expatriate community of Germans within Argentina, this was an easy transition. Right? It was just where they could get to so that they could sort of start over again. A lot of these people that were sneaking out ended up going to work in some of these plants down in Argentina that were German company plants, like a Volkswagen plant. There's a Volkswagen plant down there. So weather varies by region. Yeah. So parts of Argentina are very, what we would call tropical, your sandy beaches and very warm weather. But parts of Argentina are really, really dry, like very, very, very deserty dry. And then there are really tall mountains. So you get snow in some parts of Argentina. Depending on where you are, it's got a lot of, temperate stuff. So it's got a lot of different weather patterns down there. So when Ralph gets to Chile, and Wiesenthal finds him in Chile, the West German government and the Israeli government both start trying to extradite Ralph back to either Germany or Israel, as it may be, to put him on trial. And Chile at the time just shuts the whole thing down. There was just no chance that Chile was going to extradite him. Chile was sort of at that point leaning a little bit more communist. There was a whole coup that went down inside of inside of Chile, that brought a pretty horrible person to the throne, or not the throne, but to the presidency of Chile, backed by the United States, by the way. And anyway, this guy was basically never going to let Ralph be extradited. So Ralph died a free man. He lived out the rest of his life in Chile with a fairly comfortable life under his real name, with his family. And what's sort of really frustrating about the Ralph situation is that when he died, there were a lot of German expatriates that sort of showed up to his funeral, and his funeral was done like in the full high Nazi ceremonial sort of way, and his funeral was turned into basically one more hurrah for the Nazis, which is pretty frustrating. But so some of these big leaders got off, and some of them got brought to justice, but these rat lines are very effective, and they were used by thousands of fascists and Nazis across the European continent to get to freedom, and a great number of these people were basically going to be able to live out mostly normal lives down in South America, in places like Brazil or Paraguay or Argentina or Chile. Now, I know that some of you might be wondering what's up with From Berlin down to Belize, and that's actually a reference to a particular theme song. I don't know how many of you all watched the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego TV show when you were younger. That was one of my favorite TV shows when I was younger. And my two mods here in the chat, KP and Mac, are both big fans of the Carmen Sandiego show. So if you know the theme song to the Carmen Sandiego TV show, you'll know that she's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize, talking about Carmen Sandiego. So this is actually something that KP came up with, and this is sort of the motivation behind even having this particular stream was what's going on with the Nazis. Now, none of them actually ended up in Belize. It's fair to say that. Belize was a British colony for a long time and was not necessarily hooked up with any of these. But it's a fun little reference, and it makes people feel young, maybe. Hey, a Visual Nomad, good to see you. I hope that tickled a nostalgia bone for you all. Yeah, Rockapella was the group. All right. So now, what about the other side of the coin? Because not everybody was one of these. Is Belize where Rockapella is now? I don't actually know where Rockapella is now. They just faded away. They played themselves out, which is sort of ironic because they're an a cappella band. You get it? They played themselves out. Anyway, I thought it was funny and clever, so I said it. Anyway. So, what about the Cold War stuff, right? And this is where another big chunk of Nazis are going to get out of the country. And this is the educated Nazis, the people that had worked within the German science programs, the German state rocket programs, the military programs, etc. Now, it's fair to note that the Russians, when they took over half of Germany after World War II, basically impressed a lot of these people to work. And to a certain extent, we don't know what happened to a lot of them because, just to be honest, well, the Russians didn't play very nice. We are being visited by a puppy. Do I think Hitler made it out of Germany? No, I think Hitler died in Berlin and then was subsequently burned. You all want to see a puppy? A puppy is asking to be brought on camera. Come and see me. Come on. Oh, hello. There's a Kaylee puppy. Hello. Hello, Kaylee puppy. Oh, you are naked. She's a naked little puppy. She does not have her collar on. She got a bath earlier today. Yes, a bath and a combing. Oh, my goodness. Hello. Hello. Oh, so many sugars. What do you want? Do you want something? You want to shake? You shake? Shake? Good girl. Oh, yes. Oh, some more sugars? What do you want? Do you want to go outside? Well, look, go talk to Brittany. Go ask Brittany. Brittany will check you out. The dog is a mess. Absolute mess. Yes, we can share the puppy emotes. Oh yes, the puppy. Are you not entertained? Hey, Angel. How's it going? Thanks for that raid. Yeah, so hey everybody coming in with Angel. My name is Shane. We're doing history tonight, and we are talking specifically about Nazis who managed to escape from Germany after World War II. Angel, what were you up to? What were you playing? Wow, we have so many people. Let's start doing the shoutouts. Visual Nomad, Painter Extraordinaire, go give Visual Nomad a follow. You're playing Doom. Are you playing the new Doom, or are you playing like an old Doom on something like a DOS box or something? Go follow JMR Killer, who of course is another game streamer, but is also starting to build models. So if you like seeing me build models, you might go watch JMR Killer do some model building. Angel here, very generous with the raid coming in. Angel is a game streamer as well. He's playing the new Doom. Is a great game streamer, very laid back, very chill, has the good reactions that you look for with a video game player. We've got color by Emmy, who of course is artist responsible for Little Adventure Shane down there in the corner. Does art on Twitch. You should go follow Emmy. We have Cave Geek Art in the house. Ooh, I'm doing too many shout outs and I'm burning out the bot here. Why are you giving me so many shout outs? There we go. Cave Geek, pyrography, art, and game streamer as well. Did I miss anybody? Okay, so I should say hey to everybody. Hey, ya Angel, good to see you. Hey, ya Zinklet, thanks for dropping by, coming through with the raid. Hey, ya Emmy, hope you're having a good one as well. Cave Geek does not have the reactions you're looking for as a video gamer, and that actually makes it better. Sometimes you want to watch a streamer that's like, oh yeah, I'm going to read the stuff, I'm going to be very interactive with my chat, and then sometimes you want the streamer just to yell profanity at the bad stuff that happens on screen. So sometimes you got to have both, right? So hello to everybody that came in. We're talking about Nazis that escaped. We just got through going through some of the really, really bad, horrible, leaders of the Nazis that got out, and we're now talking about the sort of smart Nazis, the ones that were involved in the science programs. And we had just mentioned that Russia manages to effectively kidnap a lot of these people and force them into various roles within the larger Russian world. And a lot of these people sort of go under and never come up again and are basically lost because the Russians were horrible, horrible people. And Stalin was a mass murdering psychopath. So there we are. Let's try to talk a little bit about the American side of it, though. So honestly, what's going to start this is sort of a fluke. Oh, you thought your old boss was bad? Yeah, pretty much. So in 1943, so this is during World War II, the German government sort of had an understanding that things were not going well. This is after the failure of Operation Barbarossa, where Germany had launched literally the largest land invasion in history, still the largest land invasion in history, into Russia, and had failed to take Russia out of the war. And now Russia was basically rolling them up and was coming for their blood. And Germany was like, okay, crap. We don't have numerical superiority anymore, so what we need is technological superiority. We need new weapons, we need new guns, we need new, tanks and planes and missiles, all this stuff. And at that point, a particular Nazi scientist, a guy named Ausenberg, was going to put together something called the Ausenberg list. And what this was a list of everybody that was currently involved in the war effort that was highly educated. These were people that had PhDs. These were people that had high levels of experience with things like mechanics or engineering or aerodynamics, the things that you would need if you were going to build yourself a bigger war machine. And because of the Ausenberg list, a lot of these people were recalled from battle situations and brought back to the big cities inside of Germany and basically put into these military programs to create new weapons for the German army. And so the guy's name is Werner Ausenberg, by the way, and he was the head of what was, well, the German phrase is really, really long and confusing, but it's basically the Defense Research Association. And when the Allies were coming into Germany, Ausenberg's lab was actually one of the buildings that was potentially going to be targeted for takeover, and Werner Ausenberg was basically told, get rid of everything. Basically destroy everything. We don't want any of this stuff getting into the hands of the Allies. And he had taken this list, and this was like a physical list of all these people's names. Remember, back then they didn't have computers with, digital files that they could just, put it on a thumb drive or something or store it in the cloud. This was an actual list. And he tried to flush it down a toilet. So he balled up the paper and tried to flush it down a toilet, and it didn't actually go flushed. And one of the people in the building that sort of had some undercover contact with some Allied intelligence recovered the Ozenberg list out of the toilet and got it into the hands of the Allied intelligence. So now, as the Allies are basically moving through Germany, they start finding all of this stuff that the Nazis were building, and they know exactly who was working on it because they have the Ozenberg list. So they're like, oh, okay, so we need rocket scientists. Let's go to the list. And they knew who the rocket scientists were. We need jet propulsion scientists. They knew who to go look for because they had the Ozenberg list. Out of the toilet and into the frying pan, right? It's just one of those weird things that happens in history where, you never expected a floater to come back on you like that, right? Usually the worst things that happens with that is you get embarrassed by some company that comes over suddenly. But this is basically the entirety of the German mental hierarchy that gets delivered over to the Allies because of a poor plumbing situation. And you can't make this stuff up. This is where history ends up becoming funnier than fiction, right? So what ends up happening is that what year was this? So this was in 45, and the Germans were pretty much already beaten, right? That they knew that they were done, and the Allies were rolling into Germany, and now they knew who to look for, though, right? So they are looking for these people as they're coming into Germany, and this is going to bring on. This must have been an early fax machine. This is when the Allies are going to start something called Operation Paperclip. So Operation Paperclip was very basically the attempt of the United States to get as many of these German scientists as they could to America or out of the hands of the Russians. Because by the time you get to 45, it's pretty clear that Stalin was not going to honor his decisions that were made at Yalta. He was not going to be a team player. He was going to keep as much as he could put his hands on. And that was going to be the new threat, right? And America at that time had not necessarily made a 100% decision about whether or not they were going to just basically finish taking over Germany and then roll right on over and invading Russia. So they did not want these people to get into the Russian hands. Did you see Captain America and the Winter Soldier? I did. Paperclip was mentioned there was a real program. Yes, it was. Just Nazis instead of Hydra. Correct. But that was a nice little nod to this effort to get people out of Germany, right? So let's just be honest. Originally, the people that the Americans were most interested in were nuclear scientists and members of the V2 rocket program. And as you might expect, this is because, we want to be able to shoot nuclear warheads through space in a big parabolic arc and blow up basically anywhere on Earth. And they knew that was a big deal to begin with. So the people that they're sort of interested in getting earliest are the V2 rocket program members and nuclear scientists. But it's pretty quickly going to shift to, holy crap, these Germans were actually really, really smart. Let's just get as many of them as we can. And it's absolutely fair to say, because it's actually the truth, that the Americans kidnapped a lot of these people. Unfortunately, to the best of our knowledge, we didn't digitize an Austrian scientist into a bunker computer. Yeah, Zola's pretty much dead. Have I read Gravity's Rainbow? I have not read Gravity's Rainbow. Should I read Gravity's Rainbow, Tuna? I'm not opposed to putting it on the list. So, yeah, kidnapping. This is very similar to what the Russians were doing. But hopefully the Americans treated them a little bit better. They did not disappear these people. They did hide these people and give them new names. A lot of these German scientists were brought, though, whether or not they wanted to be brought. So who did they actually get? Well, they got about 1,800 different scientists. And this was just the first round. So like the first sweep, they got about 1,800 scientists from various different locations. And then in a second sweep, they got a lot of those people's families. So basically, when you got brought to wherever you were located, some of these were in the Allied part of Germany, and some of these got brought all the way to the United States. Some of them were sort of halfway stationed in places like France and Britain. But about 1,600 of them ended up in America. So then there's this big second wave where their families got brought over, which is, I guess, nice. You know, if you're going to be kidnapped, it's nice for them to go get your family and bring your family to where they have kidnapped you to. It is fair to say that these people were kidnapped, though. This was not necessarily, hey, would you like an all-expenses-paid vacation to America? It was, hey, does this rag smell like chloroform? Maybe it's following a secret agent that is sent to Germany during this time to look for a secret V-1000 rocket. Ooh. But that isn't really what the author was focusing on. Was the author focusing on Operation Paperclip? If so, that might be an interesting read. All right, so Operation Paperclip. Who actually did they get? Who were these actual people? All right. Well, we have people like this guy. Herbert Wagner, who is this guy. This guy was an aerodynamics engineer and was sort of basically the guy for the Russian jet program. So they only got paper clips, right? So one of the things that the Russians were doing was trying to develop a jet fighter. Not like a propeller plane, but one that used a jet engine. And Herbert Wagner was involved in a lot of that stuff. Lots of sex, drugs, and hippie philosophy. Might have to pass on that one. But I'll check it. I'll see if it's available. If I can get it in an audiobook, I'm always looking for new things to listen to when I'm driving to work. So Wagner is going to get brought over to America and starts working on a lot of, as you might expect, American jets, which are going to be sort of the envy of the world. Here's probably the one that most people will know. If you know anything about this, you might have heard of Werner von Braun, who is this guy. Sex, drugs, and hippie philosophy is exactly what you think of when you think Nazi Germany. It's on many must-read before you die lists. Interesting. You were about to ask if we got to the Nazis who moved to the U.S. Yes. Max, patron saint. Ooh, I don't know if we can go that far. Werner von Braun, though, is basically the guy who was the head of the German V2 missile program. This guy was a ballistic missile specialist, and he is going to get brought to the United States originally under the sort of guise of the military, but is going to end up spending a lot of time over sort of, I guess, on loan is the right way of saying it, with NASA. And he is basically the guy that is instrumental in the United States satellite program. The fact that we have satellites right now orbiting us has a lot to do with this guy, Werner von Braun. He's a pretty big deal. And yeah, Mac in a Lab Coat is a really big fan of science and the technological side of things, and the work of this guy is one of the things that Mac's pretty interested in. Not that Mac is like a secret closet Nazi or something like that, because he isn't. All right. How about Adolf Busemann? Who is this guy. So this is Busemann. He was an aerodynamics engineer. So specifically dealing with airflows and different sorts of designs and shapes. He is going to mostly be interested in wing shapes. And I know that seems like a sort of a specialist thing to be focused on, but a lot of these people were sort of kind of niche scientists. But he's really interested. The intro screen, which apparently I clicked on, he's interested in what's called swept wing technology. So instead of having the wings come directly out perpendicular to the fuselage, having them sort of swept back at an angle. And he is going to be instrumental in creating the world's first supersonic aircraft. So this is, stuff that breaks the sound barrier. Busemann's a pretty smart guy when it comes to aerodynamics and aerospace engineering. All right. Moving along. Eberhard Ries, who is this guy, and arguably the most successful of the entire paperclip group. Ries is absolutely he's a super genius. This guy is crazy smart. He had originally been working with stuff that's called ablative material, which, how many people are just, all about some ablative material. But basically this is material that sheds heat very easily. And if you are coming back in through the atmosphere, ablative material is a pretty big deal because of the friction caused by, moving back through the atmosphere. This guy is going to become a pretty big deal when it comes to space shuttle technology. He is going to design and implement lots of changes in the way that America did rockets. He's also going to be the guy that develops and designs the lunar rover. So if you've ever seen the little moon buggy that the astronauts rode around on when they were on the moon, that's the guy that designed it. He's also going to be the guy that draws up and oversees the launching of the first space station, which was called Skylab. That was sort of his brainchild and his baby. Eberhard Ries is a really brilliant dude that had a lot of impact. Ended up living in Florida for the rest of his life and had a lot of success there. So not everybody that got sneaked out of Germany was a horrible monster like, Mengele or Ralph or Eichmann, but they were. So here's a fair question to ask. Were these scientists Nazis? Busemann literally translates to booger in Norwegian. Yeah, that's interesting. I was unfamiliar with that translation, Joey. I really want to make a joke here about flicking a booger and how it flies through the air and make some sort of aerodynamic joke about that, but I don't know where it is. Wow. Okay, so here's the question. Were these scientists in Operation Paperclip Nazis? Or were they German scientists under the Nazi command? And this is a fair question to ask, and it is one that America had to answer a lot of questions about. And yes, sometimes some of these people were active, real big Nazis. People that had connections to the human experiments that went on at the camps. Some of them, especially some of the bigger ones that were at some of the research and development labs where they were fabricating a lot of this stuff, used slave labor, basically captured prisoners of war or Jewish people that would have otherwise been in camps that were forced to work to fabricate some of these components. Some of these people were very much very active, real old-fashioned Nazis. And America did a lot to try to sweep as much of that under the rug as they could, especially when it came down to the people that were using slave labor and the people that were at some of the concentration camps doing the human experimenting. And it's pretty clear that some of these people even came up in things like the Nuremberg trials as potential targets for criminal prosecution, and America hid them. Either gave them new names or basically sent them undercover for a while until everything blew over. So America even knew that some of these people were real big Nazis. So there you go. Now, some of them were in the Nazi Party, but not necessarily active members of the Nazi Party. It is fair to note that if you were a professional in Germany during the war and you were in a position of some prominence, perhaps a professor at a college or the head of a particular factory, you were expected to join the Nazi Party. And it's pretty clear that a lot of these people, and this I should say honestly, some of these people joined the Nazi Party out of convention, not out of desire. Basically, it was join this Nazi Party or be considered an enemy of the state and potentially end up in one of these camps or lose your job. And jobs in Germany were pretty hard to come by if you were not part of the Nazi leadership already. So some of these people were members of the Nazi Party, but not what you would consider an active member. I can't speak to the ideology of every single one of these people, right? I don't know if in their heart they thought that Jewish people weren't humans. I don't know if all of them thought that we should that humans should be sterilized if they had mental disorders or if they were physically disfigured. I don't know that. I can't speak to all of them. But some of these people were pretty clearly just basically Nazis out of necessity. But sometimes not. Some of the people that we got out were people that had been placed on the Ossenberg list because they had specific skills. And some of those people had basically been kidnapped by the German government and forced to work on these programs under pain of death or under threat that the Nazis would kill their family. So not everybody in Operation Paperclip was even a Nazi in name. Some of them were just in really bad situations. And a lot of those people were the ones that went willingly. You know, the United States intelligence services would contact them and say, look, we're trying to get people out of Germany. And a lot of the people in the first round were like, please get me out of Germany. These people that wanted to leave, that had no connection necessarily with the Nazi Party except for being forced to work for them or being kidnapped by them, a lot of those people came very, very happily to the United States. So some were very much real active Nazis. Some were in the Nazi Party, but like about the Nazi ideology maybe. And some of them were in really bad situations where because they had technical knowledge, they were being forced into a position that they did not really want. So there you go. So Paperclip was a pretty big success. It put America basically into the game. Of course, the Russians had missile technology of their own, and they had a lot of German scientists that had basically been put underground in their particular world. So, yeah, that's kind of a brief breakdown of the two big different types of Nazis that managed to get out. The brass, who were able to sneak out through rat lines, and the brains, who were brought over in things like Operation Paperclip. So that is actually going to wrap it up for the portion of the stream that I had prepared. However, as always, if you have questions about this or pretty much anything else, I would be happy to answer. If anybody has any point redemptions that they would like to break out, now would be a good time to do so. Otherwise, we can maybe start thinking about like a poll. Anybody else have any questions or anything like that? You're welcome to go ahead and put those in the chat. Okay, something is screwy here. Where's the button for a poll? Oh, Twitch, stop doing weird things. Coincidence that those are the two countries that had a space race. Yeah. So, Cave, I want to go back and look at the old polls, because when we do viewer request polls, I always pull the number 2 winner from the old poll over into the new poll. And I didn't remember what the last one was. It was the First Crusade, by the way. Oh yeah, you could go back and look at the last poll that you've run. And that's something that I do to try to make sure that things that people consider are really good ideas for a viewer request get rolled over to the next option. What's in the news? Joey, do you have anything specific that you'd like for me to talk about, or you just want me to talk about what's in the news? I'm fine either way. Something I'm excited about. Something that I'm excited about. There's a really big wine factory that was discovered in Israel not too long ago. It's been under excavation for about 2.5-3 years right now. But the report just got published a few days ago. So, and this is pretty fascinating. I meant to put a link of that in the Discord, but I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. So this would have been from around 500 or so when this particular facility was at its height. This would have put it in the region of time that we call the late antique period. By this point, Western Rome had fallen. So Western Rome fell in 476, and we would have had the emergence of what some people will call Byzantine Empire. A lot of people... so I'm of the opinion that you don't really call them the Byzantine Empire until after the Emperor Heraclius, and I can even go into a lot of the detail about that when we get there. I would particularly call this Eastern Rome at this point. Anyway, names aside, this was a pretty big production. It's not too far from this location in Israel called Yavna, and they've been digging it up for a while. But this particular factory would have made like ridiculously large amounts of wine. The people that were doing the excavating found vats and all sorts of winemaking materials and things, and they estimated that this particular facility would have been able to make 2 million liters of wine in a year, which is just astronomical. No. So it came from the year 500, so it's like 1,500 years old. But it's in the news now, and I'm excited about it. So you left me some latitude here. If you want me to talk about something that's up to date, if I have cheated you, what's something that I'm excited about in the news lately? there have been a lot of earthquakes lately, and I'm really happy that people have not massively died from them. So there's a really big earthquake in Japan last week and did not cause any deaths. There's a really big earthquake a couple of days ago, or I guess yesterday, or maybe early this morning in Greece, and nobody's died from that. No tsunamis or anything. So that's good news. Trying to think if there's been anything that's just like really, really, really good news. America looks like it's going to stand up to China and not let them just roll in and take over Taiwan, which I think is a really good thing. If you all have been around the channel long enough, you'll know that I have a pretty negative opinion on the Chinese government at the moment. So them getting a little bit of a no, you can't do that is a good thing. So there's good news. Yeah, so there are several things that are in the news, and somewhere in there you got something happy. Okay, so here we go. Here's the question. And as always, I'm going to take the first three options that look doable. We're about to start a poll on what we will cover on the next viewer request stream. So the second place runner-up topic from the last poll was the First Crusade. It has been added to the list here. So what I need are three things from you all, and we will take the first three that are good and doable. So this actually, Kelly, was a point redemption from Kilted Preacher. He burned the 20k points to pick this topic directly, and we've been talking about doing this for a while. And it had come up in a couple of polls, but it had never been particularly made all the way through. History of Things. History of Things. Oh my goodness. History of the Swifts. We could do History of Switzerland if you gave me a period of time. I couldn't do the entire history of the Switzerland. So if you gave me like medieval or Renaissance or, late antique or something like that. History of stuff. Not in context here, and probably not news, but you had a lecturer yesterday had found a piece of ceramic in Valley of the Kings. Nice. Recognized an illustration on it, a piece he had seen in a museum of Leipzig, which at the time didn't know where it came from, which personally... Oh, wow, that's really cool. Moose, Switzerland was neutral all the way up until the Peace of Westphalia. So that's in what basically ends the 30 Years' War. So before that, Switzerland had a fairly, really good military, and the Swiss Guard was a mercenary band that was feared basically everywhere. And the reason that the Swiss Guard is the protector of the papal Vatican right now is because the treaty said basically Switzerland would not sell its mercenaries to anybody except for the church. History of the Swiss Guard. That's an interesting one. We could do that. All right, one more. History of stuff. History of things. What about the history of things and stuff? That might be a little bit too much. We might need to back off on that one. We need one more. I got you, Tuna. I got History of the Police on there. You just want me to put it twice so that it has a better chance of winning. Anybody can give anything, by the way. Did you hear of the time that the Swiss accidentally invaded Liechtenstein? History of marijuana? We could do that. All right, so I'm about to hit start, and what's going to happen is that I'm going to hit start, and we're going to see a poll. It's going to pop up in your chat window, and everybody here can vote. If you are within the sound of my voice, you can vote, so go do so. I have not heard of the Swiss invasion of Liechtenstein in 2007, but that would be a really interesting thing to talk about. Everybody at this point should be voting, though. So look in the chat window above your chat. There's a little down arrow, and it says, "What shall we cover next?" Everybody can vote. Everybody. You do not have to be a follower. You do not have to be a subscriber. Everybody gets to vote. Everybody. We have 18 people in the chat, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 votes. So 11 of you can go vote and should go vote. Make your voices heard. A company of 171 Swiss soldiers took a wrong turn during a military exercise. And they just drove into Liechtenstein. Oh, and I bet Liechtenstein was like, "What are you doing?" Shiggy says downvote. Shiggy, are you anti-democratic? Is that the goal here? It's such a force unannounced as technically an invasion. Technically so. I wonder if they had to... Liechtenstein was pretty cool about it. Yeah, I would suspect so. Liechtenstein seems like a pretty cool country. Like, look, I mean, we've got like... Oh, how big is Liechtenstein? It's like 37-something miles. Let's go look to see how big Liechtenstein is. Let's put up our borders, and we'll go look at Liechtenstein. Woo! Oh, wow. Let me turn off roads. Roads, go away. All right, let's get our ruler out. We're going to ruler how big Liechtenstein is. It is 15.77 miles long. So 16 miles long. Let me do that in kilometers for our European friends. It's 24.45 kilometers. And it's so small, I lost it. Like, when I was zooming in, I lost where I was. I was like, nope, there it is. A country that small, I mean, you got to have some cool stuff. Liechtenstein was pretty cool about it. I thought you were voting on something else. Negative. Have you ever heard of the fastest manhole cover known to man? You just learned of this yesterday. I have not heard of this, Tuna, no. You think Liechtenstein also had a time when they sent... Yes, so... Yes, they went to war, and they sent out their one army unit. I think it had 80 people in it. And along the way, they made an Italian friend who came back with them. Or maybe it was an Austrian friend. I think it was an Italian friend. And they came back with 81 soldiers. The only reason you've been to Finland was your father took a wrong turn. The words I learned after I asked him, "What does welcome to Suomi mean?" Yeah, they had negative casualties. We attempted to invade Liechtenstein, but we ended up by Austria by accident. We blew right past the place. All right, let's see what we've got. Where'd my poll go? All right, results are in, and First Crusade by a long shot. So, First Crusade, 6 votes, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, some people still didn't vote, but that's okay. So, our next viewer request stream will be the First Crusade. Deus Vult. God wills it. Landslide, well, you know, competitively speaking, it got more votes than the other 3 put together. Are we sure Dominion didn't switch the votes? I'm not going to say anything about Dominion because they have a really big legal team and they are suing the devil out of people. So I'll just say I'm sure that they didn't. In the late 50s, there was an underground nuclear test where they miscalculated the effects of the gas venting and launched a 4-inch thick steel cap possibly into space. Wow! That's crazy. Shiggy demands a recount. Most interesting wars in a historical context. Interesting by what metric, Metrand? Like, just the ones that I think are the most interesting, or the ones that are, like, most impactful? Give me a little bit more to go on than just interesting by my metric. So the 3 wars that I think are the most interesting. Okay, so we'll go 3-1. Number 3, World War I, because people don't pay enough attention to it, and people don't really understand how important it was. People do not understand how important World War I is. My number 2 most interesting war to me, the Second Punic War. This was between Rome and Carthage. It had some of the most spectacular tactical victories in history. It was a knockdown, drag-out war that basically came down to who had the most gumption to win. It was a pretty big deal. And the most interesting war to me doesn't technically have a name, but it is the war that ended the Bronze Age. This is a 4-way war that started when Assyria attacked Mitanni, and that turned into a 3-way contest between Mitanni and Hattusis on one side and Assyria on the other, and that ended with, that transitioned to Mitanni collapsing, and then a big battle between Egypt and Hatti, which is the Battle of Kadesh, which basically crippled both of those foreign powers. Then a 2-way battle between Hatti and Assyria, which basically left both of them crippled, and this basically collapsed the Bronze Age and destroyed a system of cosmopolitan peace that had stretched for about 3 centuries. And it destroyed culture in certain areas so much that cities that had 30,000 or 40,000 people living in them evaporated and were never habitated again. 4-way straight out of Bronze Age Big Battles War is the official name for it. In honor of the Hitchhiker's Guide Day, towels, guidebooks, and babblefish. Oh, wow, that's great. Oh, that's tough, though. Like, if I could have any of those, which ones would I have? Man. I would probably put babblefish first, because I would love the ability to speak with everybody on Earth. That would be so interesting to me. Just to have easy 2-way communication. That would be such a gap between knowledge and hate. And, oh man, if we could all talk to each other and understand each other naturally, that would go so far. I'm getting kind of philosophical and preachy, but babblefish is number 1. A guidebook would be super helpful. Basically, having the internet without having to have internet. A collection of all knowledge in my hand without needing an external connection to the internet. That'd be really cool. And I know that towels are like the coolest thing ever, and you're never supposed to leave your home without them, but I'd have to put it third. So I would go backwards in order of how you listed it. Babblefish, guidebooks, towels. You're surprised that Infinity War did not make the list. I just like the idea of having a fish as a new official translator for most countries. I'd be fine with that because we would have the ability to communicate without gaps in understanding. That would be the greatest thing. That would be so great. All right, ladies and gents. Anybody else have any questions or any sort of I don't know, any other things that you want to talk about or anything that you want to redeem or anything like that? Otherwise, we're going to go find ourselves somewhere to raid. Let's see who else might be streaming. Who else is streaming? Architecture, probably not on. That's been going on for a while. All right, I was looking at. Let's see if this particular streamer is still around. Looks like it. So, okay, I have recently been lucky enough to join a group called the Knowledge Fellowship, which is a group of play House of the Rising Sun for us. I'm really not set up for that at the moment. I don't have my guitar with me, and I would have to go through audio testing to see if everything was right. Maybe some other. Catch me when I'm building a Gundam stream and I have a little bit more free time and it's not 9 o'clock already. Lots of people today hate each other because they talk to each other, but in the grand scheme of things, it would probably help. I think so too. Anyway, so I have joined a group called the Knowledge Foundation, which is a collection of streamers who stream educational content. And I have been looking to try to raid people that are more educational minded every now and then when we can. Number one, it makes new friends, and new friends are always cool. And number two, if I'm going to be part of the group, I should sort of, do my part in the group. So we are going to go raid a streamer called Strager, who is a software and game development guy and currently is taking questions about coding. And I know that we have some people here that are interested in computer coding and such. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to head. And I'll click the button and we will go ahead and get this started. So as always, thank you all so very, very much for stopping by and hanging out. I hope you all had a great time. I had a really good one. This was a really interesting topic. Thanks to KP for spinning the points. We're going to be back on Thursday where we will talk about Rome going through some really, really rough times and pulling it out sort of at the last minute. Really interesting topic. Some stuff that I'm pretty directly interested in, and we'll get to see some pictures that I've taken directly. Some adventure hat kind of stuff. Otherwise, thanks. Hope you have a good one. We're going to go raid Strager. Again, I've never been to Strager's channel, but a member of the Knowledge Fellowship. So this will be an interesting raid. And our battle cry, as always, is adventure with lots of exclamation points and those lovely adventure hats if you got them. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great couple of days. I will see you back on Thursday, and take it easy. So, adios.